Welcome to Immigration Unpacked, real legal help for immigrants.
Hello and welcome to Immigration Unpacked, real legal help for immigrants with Kevin J. Stewart. Kevin is a dedicated immigration attorney committed to helping individuals and families across California and beyond. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Deportation Defense 101, Understanding the Legal Process. Kevin, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Hard to have a topic in what you do and not have it not be topical. Obviously, this one is incredibly topical right now. So let's start here. What are some of the most common reasons someone might face deportation, and how do they defend against these charges?
Sure. And there's several ways that this can happen. I mean, take you back to kind of like the normal world before this year, in the sense that, let's say you're undocumented. That's the first way that we can sort of start the conversation. And when I say undocumented, that means that you don't have any lawful presence. Now, the focus would be someone who entered without inspection, we call it, so crossed the border. This could be recently, it could be many years ago, and they're just here. So let's say you are picked up for some crime, even a low-level crime. What can happen is that you, depending on where you are, you would then come under the attention of immigration authorities. And so that would cause you to be issued what we call a notice to appear. A notice to appear is the start of the government's, it's always the federal government, the government's case against you, basically for your unlawful presence in the U.S. And it can also happen. I mean, it's rare, but it can happen if you're overstaying a visa. So you came legally, but you now are without authorization in the U.S. Let's say you applied for a green card or you applied for naturalization after getting a green card. For some reason, something in your background kicks you out. You get or some other problem, you get denied. And then you get referred to immigration court. And then that's, again, this notice to appear. So that's how the process starts. And from there, you have options in most cases.
So what happens next after that? So let's just use any one of your examples. Maybe somebody had a small crime or something like that, and they have to get a notice to appear. What does the process look like, and how can they defend themselves in that situation? I guess that one might be a little trickier, but what does the legal process do there?
Yeah, it actually, it is a little bit trickier because, and I should also explain there are two paths. So the notice to appear path usually is for someone who has been in the country more than 2 years. They haven't been accused of a serious crime that kind of brought them into this attention. And they're in what we call the interior of the country, which is anywhere more than 100 miles from the border, although this is constantly changing. Now, you can, if you are a recent arrival and the government, they get you, they can put you in what we call expedited removal. So expedited removal, there's no notice to appear per se. Basically, what happens is you go into a separate process where it's very limited. You don't really have the chance to go before a judge. You probably are detained. And this is kind of what we're seeing with a lot of folks that's happening right now, where they're literally being picked up off the street and then deported.
Yeah, they're just like put on planes, right?
Yes, that's expedited removal.
Okay.
So and I mean, it's actually, it goes beyond expedited removal, actually, in the sense that even with expedited removal, there are ways that you can argue for asylum. You can ask for, you can actually get to see a judge. But and this is actually more part of what's happening right now politically. The way that this is being used, the Alien Enemies Act, or that's Foreign Enemies, or whatever it is. What's happening now is that all these rules are sort of being changed. People who are in immigration court are being picked up and deported. And so anyhow, this is how the system is supposed to work. It makes it really difficult to give people a definitive answer on some of this. But the way it's supposed to work is, assuming you're not in expedited removal, that you get a notice to appear, and then you have an opportunity to answer what are the charges and the factual allegations in the notice to appear.
So obviously it varies by case, but what kind of strategies are you able to use to defend clients that might be facing deportation?
So the most common strategy that people are familiar with is asylum. And when a person is seeking asylum for one of the protected categories, then that's we evaluate whether whether they have a credible claim for asylum. And if they do, then we file an application for asylum with supporting documentation, and then that gets you into the system, and that's your primary way of fighting deportation in that case. There are other ways. People can get relief, at least have in the past, by having a path to lawful residence. If, let's say, it would have to be an immediate family member, a parent, or a spouse that's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident filing a petition for you, then that gives you a way. In immigration court, certainly in the past, would take your case off calendar or would postpone your case just on a showing that you have a way to lawful status. But that's being curtailed right now.
Right, right. Can you talk about some other waivers or forms of relief? Isn't there's something called cancellation of removal? Can you explain what that is?
So cancellation of removal is available either to green card holders, lawful permanent residents who end up in removal proceedings, or non-lawful permanent residents who end up in removal proceedings. And what's required is you need to be in the country for 10 years or more. Well, in the case of lawful permanent residents, green card holders, the cancellation works as a waiver for certain offenses, low-level offenses usually. And then you can also file for waivers for more serious offenses in connection with that. And for non-green card holders, you actually have to have a showing of more or less clean record, and also the 10 years. In both cases, you need to have a qualifying relative who's a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. It can be a spouse, parent, or a child.
Okay. And what about factors like family ties, long-term residence, community involvement? Can all these things impact a person's chances of avoiding deportation?
Under either of those, the cancellation, either type of cancellation, those are definitely involved. Obviously, with asylum, it's a very different analysis. There isn't really an overriding discretionary ability of the immigration court to consider those things. Basically, the way it works is that once you're in removal proceedings, you're sort of on track to, at the end of the process, be deported. You would normally have a choice whether to take what they call voluntary departure. That also has some requirements in it. The thing about voluntary departure is that if you follow that and you're eligible for that, you might be able to come back sooner. And then that ability to come back would be based on someone petitioning for you and you qualifying for that and going through that whole process.
Okay. And when it comes to people with, criminal records, or convictions, are there defenses that can be employed for someone like that to avoid deportation, or is when you get to that point, is it just really difficult?
So there are two ways that this can be approached. One is if the person has the ability to have the violation vacated we talked a little bit about waivers. If the person has a path to lawful status, then there's a potential that they can get a waiver based on hardship to a family member. Then that's a whole process that exists outside of removal proceedings. The other thing is if they can get the criminal charge vacated, that gives them the ability to basically explore some of these other ways of defending against deportation. So it might make them eligible for cancellation under non-green card holder cancellation, for example. Then the other thing is that you can, let's say, there's nothing you can do about your criminal record, not really a waiver available. You can ask the court for withholding of removal only. There's under Convention Against Torture, the standard is lower that you have to meet than the standard for asylum, or if you don't have a case for asylum. That's a bit of a last resort because withholding of removal, while it keeps you from being deported in most cases, depending on who's in the White House. And what I'm talking about there is that we currently have this situation where someone had withholding of removal and was sent to El Salvador.
El Salvador, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the thing about withholding of removal is if your family and your life is here and you have a fear that you can show of being returned to your home country, then that protection keeps you from being deported, indefinitely. I mean, it's more or less permanent. But the thing is, you can't leave. And so let's say, for example, you come from a country where, you would want to be able to see family or something, you're relatively young, you're in your 30s, 40s. And, I get calls from people. It's like, well, I have this withholding of removal, is there some way that I can get this changed? There has been in the past. It isn't with this administration. I kind of doubt that there's anything that's going to change with that, in the sense that theoretically you could reopen your case and have the withholding ended. There's a removal order in place. This is technically how it works, but the withholding order supersedes that and makes it so that it can't be enforced normally. Mm-hmm. So, but it's hard. It's hard for people who have family in their country of origin, where and where they also have family here. They have, in many cases, U.S. citizen children. Lots of reasons that they would want to be able to get a green card or become a citizen, but with withholding of removal, you can't.
Mm-hmm. With all the chaos happening right now, I'm sure you're getting loads of phone calls. Like, how difficult is it for you to kind of coach people who are calling you, given the uncertainty of what is going on these days?
Yeah, it's really hard for everyone because we depend on the system to operate normally. So, someone gets a notice to appear, they reach out to me, I look it over, I decide, and I talk to them about, what best approach to take. There's nothing that keeps ICE from grabbing them up. Mm-hmm. I mean, even after we have all of us practicing immigration law in this area have heard of people who have pending court dates. They've been reporting to ICE, or they've non-detained, getting picked up and being put into, it wouldn't be what we call expedited removal at that point, but what it is that the administration, and in their managing of this system, has decided to go through and target certain people. And sometimes it's criminal. In most cases, it's not. In other words, we've heard a lot about, we're going to get the worst of the worst.
Yeah, the gang leaders. Exactly. And all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's simply, it's demonstrably false. Everything. My understanding is that half of those people that went to CCOT in El Salvador don't have criminal records at all. Mm-hmm. They happen to be Venezuelan. So look, and as we've hinted on in the past, and as I will insist, this is not a partisan thing as much as, look, Obama, they called Obama the deporter in chief. Obama was trying to use the system to get Congress to finally act on immigration reform. But, what's happening now, is it political? Obviously it's political, but it's not about the issue of illegal immigration and crimes and all of this. It's really not about that. It's more about what leads to political power. I'm sort of I don't mean to get off track. I still maintain, because we're not fixing the basic problem, which is that legal immigration, which is what what I and all of my colleagues practice, that field is not practical or fair or, any of that. And it's not, and that's just getting completely worse. It's not getting any better. And that's the responsibility of both parties.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is political, but it doesn't have to be a partisan issue if because it's obviously it needs reform, but going about it in the way of, it's a very typical, I don't want to get too political, but it's a very typical way of this administration is just to knee-jerk reaction, do stuff rather than really think things through. So people can get together and find the right way to reform it. It's a good thing, but when you just start to deport people who don't deserve to be deported, then you're running, it's a slippery slope there.
Yeah, and one thing, I think people should understand, it's really like any kind of law enforcement. It's actually difficult to identify, locate, and prosecute the people who are committing the crimes and who are the most danger. That's
Right.
just always the most difficult. So who's getting snapped up in what's going on now in order to meet quotas? It's everybody,
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not the most dangerous people that they're claiming that they're targeting.
No.
Well, certainly a big issue, and one that's going to be difficult for the country and for people like you, Kevin. So kudos to you for doing what you're doing. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on Immigration Unpacked, real legal help for immigrants with Kevin J. Stewart. To connect with Kevin, head to oaklandimmigrationlaw.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Kevin, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for the insight. Definitely a big issue. Appreciate your thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.